From Harvard Eye Associates, I want to welcome back to our program Dr. John Hovhannissian. Thank you for joining us.
Good to see you, Michael.
So we're going to talk about something kind of interesting today, which I had never heard of until you told me, hey, let's talk about this, and we started going over the topic. Folks who can change their eye color cosmetically just for the look of it. Now, I remember the old contact days when people started wearing contacts, but that kind of went out. But there are a couple things that people are doing to actually change it kind of on a permanent way, right?
Yes, and the good news is there are surgical procedures designed to change your eye color. The bad news is you don't want to have them.
Right. And the first one I want to talk to you about is iris implants. Now, this is the one that was developed for people who have some sort of birth defect or some sort of damage in their eye to replace the eye color portions that have disappeared, right?
Yeah, so first a little anatomy lesson. The iris is what gives our eye its color, what makes your eyes brown, what makes my eyes blue. It's a very delicate tissue that's inside the eye. And think of it like a watch crystal. You've got the cornea, which is the clear part of the eye that sits in front of it, and then behind it is the face of the watch that has the color, and that's the iris inside your eye. And so in certain people who've had either injuries or surgery or birth defects, as you point out, that lead to defects in the iris, it can look very funny. And it's not only cosmetically an issue, though. For them, it also can be a visual issue because the iris has an important job to do. It opens when we're in dim light, so we see more light. It closes in bright light, so we have less light so that the eye can see. But also, when light passes through parts of the iris that the eye doesn't focus well, through the edges of the iris, it causes visual problems. And so when there's a defect, we want to close that if we can. And so there have been developed and FDA approved artificial iris implants that can be put in the eye, partially behind the existing iris, and that protects it from the delicate cornea, the front window. And that's the important thing, because when these are used in cosmetic purposes, if you want to change the color of your whole iris, you have to put an implant in front of the eye in a place that is very dangerous to the cornea.
Yeah, and that's not really meant to have anything there, right? Exactly. That's not the eye structure that's there. So when people are doing it cosmetically, and then I guess some doctors will do this, maybe you have to fly to Mexico, I don't know what you have to do this, but maybe some eye doctors who aren't maybe as scrupulous are saying, sure, we'll do this cosmetic surgery for you. It can cause real challenges for the eye and cause some bad defects going on, right?
Yeah, the happiest day after the surgery is the day after surgery, because people look in the eye and they see what looks like, wow, my eye has this new color. And then every single day after that, things get worse and worse and worse, because eventually the cornea completely fails and the eye becomes white and cloudy looking, the opposite of what you want. Vision becomes non-existent from the eye. And the problem at that point is that the person needs a corneal. First of all, they need that implant removed, and they need a corneal transplant.
Right, and you could lead to blindness.
It's blinding.
And you can have light sensitivity. There's all sorts of challenges that come on with doing this. So, why are people doing it? Do they not understand the risk, or they're not being told as they go into these cosmetic situations?
Don't it make my brown eyes blue? That's why they do it. I mean, we've sung about and celebrated blue-eyed people and having a different color from what you have, whether you wanted a lighter brown or what color it is that you want. You can theoretically have it now, and it's one of the basic things about us that many people want to change. We'll talk about iris or keratopigmentation, which is the other way to change, the other procedure, which is also dangerous. But both of these have risks that are just way too high for cosmetic purposes.
And one of them could be like maybe increasing the risk of cataracts when you're doing this as well?
Yeah, well, so the one we just talked about would definitely increase the risk of cataract. Cataracts would almost always form. And,
So the other one, eye tattooing, or technically it's keratopigmentation?
Yeah, keratopigmentation. Kerato means cornea and pigmentation. Or tattooing. Now, again, corneal tattooing is a procedure that I've done for almost 30 years, but not for cosmetic purposes.
Okay.
Sometimes, again, we'll have a defect in the cornea, or rather a defect in the iris, where we want to block light from coming through. And actually, it's a fairly simple and fairly effective way to block light in that area.
Okay.
Similarly, if we have white scars in the cornea, sometimes we will tattoo those to match the iris behind them. And it can take what's an unsightly white scar and make it look, much less noticeable. And so there are places where it's reasonable to do keratopigmentation, but to do it for changing the color of the iris, boy, there are some problems with this procedure, and it's ones that I would certainly not recommend to somebody I care about.
Right, and what are some of the damages that can happen? I mean, can we actually, again, lead to more cloudiness, or does the pigment, can it spread?
Yes, the pigment can spread or dissipate and lose its effect. That's usually the least of the problems.
Oh, okay.
Then we lose whatever benefit you thought you'd get from the procedure. But worse yet, it can cause melting in the cornea. We've certainly seen that, where there's a loss of tissue, and that's caused by the body not reacting well to the pigment.
Okay.
And
it's
so
rejecting it as a foreign object.
Sort of
kind
rejecting
thing?
it as a foreign object, and then kind of sending white blood cells that attack the pigment, but also the surrounding cornea. There's a lot of collateral damage that will cause the eye to have permanent scarring. And can you imagine, you're doing this for a large area, basically the entire cornea outside of the pupil, and that's a problem. Also, of course, you wouldn't be able, the tattoo pigment would block light from coming through, and you can't regulate the size of the pupil as God intended us to operate, so we lose that ability. And there are many other problems. Infection can occur, and leakage of the pigment inside the eye can occur, although that's pretty rare. And so, the risks of that procedure really outweigh any benefits.
Right, and just the idea of going in there with the ink and then causing maybe an infection. I mean, I know when people get tattoos, they have to keep everything so clean and taped over and that kind of thing. And your eye is, you're always, touching, or something going on with the eye. Things are getting in your eye all the time, and the dangers.
Yeah.
So what are some of the worst case scenarios you've heard of or seen in terms of what can happen? I mean, blindness seems to be...
Blindness.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, one problem in the eye can lead to another. And so a corneal transplant is a pretty unpleasant thing to have to go through, especially when it wasn't really necessary. I mean, we've got better techniques for doing that these days. But when corneal transplants are necessary, usually it means serious damage, and that can also lead to glaucoma, which is irreversible in many cases. It can lead to, you mentioned cataract, it can lead to retinal problems, and a cascading effect of bad things in the eye when some of these procedures are done. And so, when you ask, okay, what is okay to do? I don't like the color of my eyes. I'm going to this event. I'd love to show up with a, with a different look.
Sure.
Contact lenses.
Contact lenses. They're back to the old one we started with.
That's right. And although contacts have their own risks and need to be used with proper precautions, like taking them out every night and using good hygiene when handling them,
Right.
And not wearing them when they're causing irritation or problems in the eye. Contacts are very well proven technology that's fairly safe, and when properly prescribed, they work great.
Yeah, and that's it's tried and true. Like you said, people wear contacts. Hundreds of thousands, millions of people wear them. We understand them. Can people just? Is it kind of like a catalog you go through? I want this color here.
Yes, in fact, Michael, you could show up for the morning show on Tuesday, and your left eye could be blue, and your right eye could be green, and then on the next day, you could have a plaid, color in your left eye. I mean, there really are some interesting and clever designs they have in these contact lenses. And you want to use one that is FDA approved. You want to use one that's prescribed by a doctor who, who's going to use a safe product, but have fun with them. They're okay to use.
There we go. So do something a little less dangerous. At least give it a test drive it before.
That's right. That's right.
Well,
That's right.
Dr. John Hovannisian from Harvard Eye Associates, thank you so much for coming in and giving us this kind of cautionary tale about something we don't want to be doing with our eyes.
Yeah.
Don't mess with your eyes unless you have to. I think that's the bottom line.
That's right. And when you hear a promise from a doctor, whether it's south of the border or north of the border, check it out. Get a second opinion with somebody who's a board-certified doctor in an established practice. We've been around for 50 years. You got the graphic up on the screen. We're honored to be to reach our 50-year milestone. So we're not a bad place to pick. But there are lots of great eye doctors in the community who can help give evaluations for these types of questions.
As always, consult your doctor before making that kind of decision.
That's it.
Thank you, Dr.
Good to see you,
Hovannisian.
Michael.
Good to see you. You're watching This Day. We'll be right back.